In this video, we're going to be taking a look at what the so-called experts are predicting for the UK housing market in 2024. Will house prices continue to fall, or is there going to be a magical recovery and house prices are going to rebound and shoot skywards from here? So what I've done, I've collated 6 or 7 of the best known house price indices out there. So the type of index that you're going to see quoted in the mainstream media or spreading on social media, or even referred to by your local estate agent when they're trying to persuade you to list with them at an unreasonable price point. So I want to go through all of their predictions, see what we can take away from that, see what conclusions we can draw, because I'm sure there are going to be many of you guys as we come to the end of 2023 over Christmas and as we head into the new year in 2024, thinking about your plans for the future. Are you going to be looking to buy a house next year? Are you going to be looking to sell a house? Maybe you're going to be doing both. Or maybe you're going to look to continue being patient and see how the housing market develops over the next few months before making a decision. So hopefully by looking through some of these predictions, you can get a good feel for what may happen, and then you can draw your own conclusion. Now, if you want to place your own prediction, feel free to scroll down and put it in the comments below. And also, if you disagree with the predictions that these experts are making, please don't blame me. I'm just the messenger. You can, of course, still like this video, even if you don't like their predictions. So let's kick things off with Rightmove, probably the best known index at the moment, even though it isn't actually a house price index, it is an asking price index for new listings only. It excludes existing listings. But let's go through their prediction for 2024. And for each of these indices, I've just got a few paragraphs to read out to cover the key takeaways for each prediction. So what will happen to house prices in 2024? This housing market this year has been better than many predicted, with lower than expected falls in asking prices and good levels of demand from home buyers for the right priced homes. However, rising mortgage and interest rates have stretched the affordability of many people planning to move. I think we're all fully aware of how affordability has been stretched by the high interest rates you're going to need to be paying on mortgage payments. Now, as to whether the housing market this year has been better than many predicted, I think that is up for debate. Now let's come down and see their prediction. So our property expert, Tim Bannister, says it's likely to be another muted year for the market. However, the better than anticipated activity this year has shown that many buyers are still getting on with satisfying their housing needs. We predict a modest average fall of 1% in new seller asking prices in 2024. The underlying level of good demand at the right price makes it unlikely that we will see a more significant drop in prices next year. Our forecast is based on whole of market data and house price predictive model using millions of supply, demand and pricing data, along with the insights from estate agents and a panel of Rightmove experts. So let's get this right. Their house price falls this year, which is 1%, is based on new listings only. Yet their prediction for the next year is apparently based on whole of market data using some sort of predicted model based on supply, demand, pricing data, along with insights from estate agents and a panel of Rightmove experts. So that's something to keep in mind as we go through all of these indices, is when they're making their predictions, what is their yardstick? Are they comparing it against their own index? And if they are comparing it against their own index, how is their index calculated? Can they apply their own adjustments to that, their own seasonal adjustments or other adjustments to make these almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you like? Now, personally, I think a 1% drop in new seller asking prices in 2024, I think it's going to be worse than that, and I'm sure many of you guys watching this video do, but this is Rightmove's prediction. So that's Rightmove done. Let's move on to the next big one, which is Nationwide. So Nationwide differ from Rightmove in their index is based on mortgage valuations, or the agreed price at the point of mortgage valuation. These guys also apply adjustments to the data as well. So always keep that in mind. So housing market activity was weak throughout 2023, which contradicts with what Rightmove said, with the housing market has been better than many predicted. So the housing market was weak throughout 2023. The total number of transactions has been running at approximately 15% below pre-pandemic levels over the past 6 months, with those transactions involving a mortgage down even further, around about 25%, reflecting the impact of higher borrowing costs. Yeah, that all makes sense to me. This subdued picture was also reflected in house prices, which in November were 2% lower than the same period in 2022 and 4.3% below the all-time high recorded in late summer 2022. One thing to keep in mind with a lot of these indices at the moment that are given these year-on-year figures or concluding the year with these year-on-year figures is at the end of 2022, we saw some very sharp drops in house prices that rebounded a little bit in spring 2023. So when we're comparing the year-on-year figure, they maybe don't look as bad as they actually are because house prices did drop quite substantially at the end of 2022 before recovering a little bit. So that's why we're only 2% lower year on year, despite being over 4% versus the peak in late summer 2022. There have been some encouraging signs for potential buyers recently with mortgage rates edging down. Yeah, I think we've all seen that. Despite the fact the Bank of England hasn't cut rates, they've held rates and they're probably going to continue holding rates for a while to come. The markets have started to price in potential cuts, so the cost of borrowing has come down. Investors have become more optimistic that the Bank of England has already raised rates far enough to return inflation to target and will reduce rates in the years ahead. This shift in view is important as it has brought down longer-term interest rates which underpin fixed mortgage rate pricing, which is what we were just discussing. Nevertheless, a rapid rebound in activity or house prices in 2024 appears unlikely. If the economy remains sluggish, which we have no reason to believe it won't, because when you look at all of the key metrics, things do not look good for the UK economy at the moment, and mortgage rates only moderate gradually, as we expect, house prices are likely to record another small decline, in brackets low single digits, or remain broadly flat over the course of 2024. So nationwide aren't expecting house prices to fall very much next year. Next up, we have Halifax. So this is on the Lloyd's website, but Halifax is part of the Lloyd's group. So this is where I found the press release, and they get straight into it. House prices are predicted to fall by between 2 and 4% in 2024, given the broader economic challenges and the likelihood that mild downward pressure on house prices continues. And if we scroll down a bit further, we've got a little bit more information. UK property prices held up better than expected over the last year, falling by just 1% on an annual basis to now sit at £283,000. It's a mixed picture across the country, with some areas seeing annual growth, such as Northern Ireland at 2.3% up, while in regions like the south of England, house prices continue to drop by nearly 6% down, which makes sense. The areas with the most expensive properties that require the biggest mortgages to afford them, because the cost of the mortgage payments has gone up so much, that's where we're seeing the biggest hit in prices. Now, what's confusing about this is they're saying that things are going to improve in 2024 compared to 2023, but they're expecting house prices to fall more. So house prices only fell 1% this year, according to Halifax, and things are going to get better because the Bank of England are holding rates and mortgage payments are starting to come down, but they're expecting falls to be greater next year by between 2 and 4%. Just something I noticed, and I thought that was a bit strange why there isn't a consistency between those two elements. So that's Halifax. We've then got Zoopla. Let's scroll down. I've got a few points to read through here. So what's going to happen to house prices in 2024? UK house prices are expected to fall 2% over 2024, so largely in keeping with what Nationwide and Halifax have said. The number of homes for sale has now reached a 5-year high, meaning sellers will need to keep pricing competitively if they're serious about selling. This will keep pricing under pressure. So one of the key arguments I see from people that don't understand that there's lots of pieces of data or data points or metrics that play a part in the housing market is all they see is supply and demand. And as long as there's more demand than there is supply, the house prices can never fall. So the fact that if you're going to base it on that argument, that the number of homes for sale is now at a 5-year high, surely these guys should now be expecting the opposite. But they're expecting a 2% fall, despite that now today, 4 in 5 housing markets are registering annual price falls, which is up from less than 1 in 20 just 6 months ago. So more areas than ever are reporting house price falls, yet a lot of people are still expecting very, very modest decreases in 2024. We've then got Savills, who are one of the biggest estate agency groups in the UK, and their prediction is very, very simple. We are forecasting price falls of 3% next year as the base rate is expected to stay at its current peak well into 2024. And I agree with that. I don't think they're going to be cutting rates early 2024. We may see something like that happen in America, but you have to look at the differences in our economic data. The UK is in a very, very different position to the US at the moment. So just because the Fed may cut rates in spring, I think the Bank of England is going to hold a bit longer. And as we saw at the last meeting, the vote was split 6-3. 3 people were still voting for hikes and 6 voted to hold. So I don't think the Bank of England rates are going to come down in the UK as quick as some people are expecting, despite the fact that mortgage rates are indeed coming down at the moment. However, when the bank begins to cut rates in the second half of 2024, there will be more capacity for growth, with our UK 5-year figure at just under 18%. So they're expecting house prices to rebound 18% in the next 5 years. So they've got a 3% decline in 2024. And then as far as that's concerned, it's all over and house prices are going to accelerate from there. Now, I'm not sure what to make of that, as when you look at the UK as a whole, the economic outlook is not one that's just going to suddenly recover in 12 months. It seems to be that there are a lot of major issues that fundamentally could lead to a long period of stagnation in this country where we just don't get very much growth at all. So I think it's hard to sit here and say we're going to return to annual house price growth of 5% on average over the next few years after a small decline in 2024. But, you know, it's impossible to predict these things. You just have to keep all of this in mind. But so far, everyone I've looked at has been pretty close to an agreement, haven't we? From 1% from Rightmove to 2, 3, 4%. It's not a big difference between all of them. We've got one here from Property 118 who is reporting on the OBR. So this is the OBR forecast. So the UK's average house price will fall by nearly £25,000 in 2024 and won't recover their 2022 house price high until 2027. That is the prediction from the OBR. And if we come down a bit further, they go on to say, our central forecast estimates that house prices will grow by 0.9% in 2023. And I think that's because they're basing it on lagging data from the land registry. So I think that's why they're predicting house prices are going to end 2023 up, when I think anyone with half a brain knows full well that house prices are definitely down in 2023. And then fall by 4.7% in 2024. So maybe that's some of that lag effect catching up. So that's why they're looking at greater drops next year versus some of the indices that we've already looked at. This would be consistent with the price of the average UK home reaching a low of around £266,000 at its trough in the final quarter of 2024. So they're expecting this crash to end at the end of 2024. The OBR highlights that the peak to trough decline in house prices will be 7.6%, which is 2.4% higher than the organisation predicted in March. So that is the OBR's prediction. That is all of the key people that you're expected to be covered in the mainstream media, social media, and referred to by estate agents. I also have a final one here from finder.com, and I thought this was interesting as they have a number of independent experts and they've asked them their opinion. So let's read through what they've got here. 8 out of 11 experts predict that house prices will fall between 5 and 10% in 2024, which is above all of the other house price indices which potentially have a vested interest. So these independent experts are expecting things to be worse in 2024. Despite this, only 1 out of 11 experts believe that housing market crash is on the horizon. Fair enough, and I can understand why people are thinking that is unlikely when you see what the indices have been reporting throughout 2023 and the fact that inflation seems to be coming down and the Bank of England seem to have paused rates, etc. So I can see why that narrative is shifting on that. 91% of experts believe that the base rate will remain paused until the end of the year. So that 9% were wrong, because obviously base rates have definitely been held to the end of the year, because in the final meeting they have held rates. So just to read on a bit further, a panel of experts are in agreement that house prices will continue to fall by as much as 10% between now and autumn 2024, according to new research conducted by a personal finance comparison website finder.com. Almost 3/4 of the experts believe that house prices will fall between 5 and 10%, with more than half expecting prices to fall between 5 and 7.5%, and 18 predicting a more substantial drop of 7.5 to 10%. And if we take a look at these experts, we have, if you ignore the ones with stars next to them, because these are ones that have been used in previous surveys, we've got someone from the Open University, someone from the University of Cambridge, a big mortgage provider, the University of Stirling, Finder.com themselves, the University of Sheffield, the University of Surrey, Leeds University, Capital Economics, CBR, CHIP, HYCM, and you can see their positions there, whether they're a lecturer, a fellow, an associate director, a professor, etc. So people I guess without skin in the game, you would say, are expecting things to be worse. Now, maybe they don't have access to the same sort of data as the other house price indices. Maybe they don't have vested interests, or maybe, just like you and me, they feel more what is happening in the real world to them and people around them, rather than just looking at the data that they're seeing on their house price indices. Now, having looked through all of these indices, I think there's a few conclusions we can draw. Number one, they're all predicting that house prices are going to fall. At the very best case, I think one of them said they may go sideways. So all of them are expecting house prices to continue falling in 2024. No one is predicting house prices will go up in 2024. So if all of these indices, with which many have vested interests, are predicting house prices are going to fall, they're always going to be a bit more positive on it, aren't they? So what do you think may really happen without the positive spin? I think the other thing to keep in mind as well is that many of these predictions that aren't expecting house prices to fall too much are based on the assumption that the Bank of England is going to start cutting rates eventually and that mortgage rates will continue to come down. Now, for the Bank of England to cut rates, they have to really get to their target. And if we scroll down to the bottom of the OBR report, I think we've got here, inflation is not expected to reach the Bank of England's 2% target until 2025. That's a year later than it has been forecast. So can we really be in a position where the Bank of England are going to start cutting interest rates all the time they haven't hit their 2% target? Maybe the government's going to come out and change that to a 3% target. I don't know. But if they do, I don't think it's a wise decision to do that until they hit their target. There's no point having a target if you're going to start cutting rates before you get to that target. So if the Bank of England don't cut rates, how does this impact these predictions, and how does it impact house prices in 2024? The other thing to keep in mind with regards to inflation as well is that now we've seen the big drop from the energy correction over the past month or two when you compared it to the year before. I think this final 1 or 2% is going to be a real slow drag and a real challenge for the Bank of England to get there when we see that services inflation and core inflation is still elevated and that salary increases are still very high as well. All of those things are going to continue to contribute towards the inflation narrative. So to just assume that inflation is done, the Bank of England are going to start cutting rates early next year and that mortgage rates are going to continue to come down further, I think that is a bold assumption when you look at the underlying economic data. Now, I'm still putting together my very own forecast for house prices in 2024. So if you want to see that, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And if you want to understand why these house price indices are broken in many cases, I'm going to pop up a video right now which talks you through why you can't rely on these house price indices. And I'll see you guys over there.